Hello and welcome into the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. I'm National Recruiting Analyst Petagna alongside 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting Andrew Ivins, and we appreciate you guys joining us this Tuesday, noon Eastern Time. We've got a loaded show for you today. Drew and the rest of the 24/7 Sports team out in Tampa Bay, Florida over the weekend at the OT7 Finals in a busy transaction wire over the weekend. Drew, it just seems like names were just flying off the board. I don't know if I remember a time like in the last 2 weeks where we've seen more of a quantity of names flying off the board as names are starting to commit left and right. It's official visit season. We're seeing that as well. Obviously, we're getting a massive influx of names that we have to turn around rather quickly. Committed guys, putting initial grades on them, and it's good for us. It's a good exercise for us. But let's start with OT7, Drew. How was it, my friend? 3 days. What a beast of an event, huh?
Yeah, like record high temperatures in Tampa. I gave Tom, I joked with him about the sunscreen. Dude, Coop, I think the sun got the best of me. I mean, we were out there 9 a.m. to like 8 p.m., 3 days in a row. They also had a skills challenge. Had some guys doing vertical jumps, bench press, and there was a squat competition. I would call it more of an exaggerated good morning competition. If they need me to get in the squat rack next year and judge some of these reps, I'm more than available when it comes to the Olympic lifting if we want to go through some technique there. But no, fun event, Coop. And it's official visit season, right? So, there's kids. Most of the high-profile guys are on visits. But I actually had heard from some college staffers, like in the days leading up, kids like canceling official visits to participate in the OT7. And the big draw is they get to play on NFL Network. Some of those games are on NFL Network. They're also on YouTube. One game at a time, so it makes it kind of easy to see everything, but a good collection of skill, talent, and really a key evaluation point for us. We don't get much best on best in the offseason. You used to have the opening finals. That's gone. This is really one of the only exposure points. I know it's 7-on-7, 2-hand touch, shirts and shorts and soft helmets, but you get to see these guys, right? And for me, I think it was a validation about how I view the board in certain areas of that wide receiver board, that cornerback board. And then I know we're going to get into the quarterbacks, Cooper. So good event overall. Wish you were there.
Pretty crazy to see the event on NFL Network. I was thinking about you, Tom, Mike Roach, the rest of the crew down there in Tampa, and then to be able to turn it on. Obviously, OT7 has done a tremendous job. And Drew, it looks like they're handing out some merch as well. Is that an OT7 bucket hat I see in the background there?
That was presented to me. That was a gift from the event organizers. Shout out Kayla. She knew we were melting in the sun, I think is the term.
Appreciate you, Kayla. Yeah, it looks good in the backdrop as well. Well, let's get to the OT7 Finals Recap. You put out a great article this morning that you can find on 247sports.com by Andrew Ivins, the dream team of the OT7. And let's start with the offense, Drew. And one of the most talked about names on this broadcast is Deuce Knight, the Notre Dame commit. Obviously, Ole Miss in there as well. A handful of other teams are sniffing around, but Gino Guidugli, Marcus Freeman, give them a lot of credit. Mike Denbrock as well. The name was escaping me there for the job that they have done with Deuce Knight. Always one of the, I would say, highest upside prospects in the class, regardless of position. We have seen that really kind of come to fruition over the offseason. He had a good week as well. A couple other names, Talon Taylor, Donovan Olabode, Jamie French, Vernell Brown, a couple younger guys, Vance Spafford, Mark Bowman. Excited to talk about him out of Mater Dei. So there you have it with the offense. But let's start with that quarterback, that smooth-stroking lefty, Deuce Knight. Just your impressions of him over the weekend.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to get some pushback. I've already seen it out there. Tramell Jones, the Florida State commit, he leads the South Florida Express to a championship. And Tramell was awesome. But if I'm assembling, this is my dream team, right? I want Deuce Knight. I thought there was no one that pushed the ball down the field like him. You said he's a left-handed quarterback, Cooper. That two-ball out-breaking route, it was pretty. And there were some high-level throws, tight lines, could dial up the velocity. And look, we've said it on this space. Deuce Knight is a streaky quarterback. You get one good exposure point, and then the next one leaves you wanting to see more. I thought he put together 3 really strong days. His team, the Coastline Stars, they fall in the title game. He threw 2 picks that game. One of them was kind of like a free for all with a few seconds left, where he was just trying to give his team a chance to tie the game and force overtime at overtime OT7. Coop, 63.5% is what I marked him down for. There was no official stats. I was doing my best to kind of track them. They had a press box, and then I was doing it on my phone. But 25 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions, and there really wasn't a ton of turnover worthy throws. And I know some people be like, oh, 63%, there's no running game. I mean, throwing into some pretty talented secondaries, and Deuce Knight didn't have like the greatest all-star supporting cast of wide receivers. He had a kid, Christian Neptune, who is a major stock-up 3-star out of Florida's Panhandle. He was one of his favorite targets. And then Tristan Keys, a 2026 wide receiver. So I just thought it was a really encouraging performance for Deuce Knight, who has been up and down. It was what we wanted to see heading into not only the Elite 11 finals, which are next week, but then his senior season. And on the field, it's kind of been the same story as what these camps and tournaments. I mean, sometimes he's on, sometimes he's not, but for him to do it really, he played 10 games. I would say from game 2 to game 9, I don't think there was a better quarterback in attendance when it came to distributing the football and making high-level throws.
Expectations for Deuce Knight. And let's dish on him a little bit, because I got a text yesterday from a SEC staffer inquiring about Deuce Knight. He has been a hot topic. I know Tom Lloyd. We were in the office together. Got another text from somebody that's in the NFL about Deuce Knight inquiring as well. So he's one of the hottest names in all of college football recruiting right now. But Drew, what do you expect to see from him in Los Angeles just a week from now at the Elite 11 finals? There's going to be guys like Tavian St. Clair, Julian Lewis, Hassan Longstreet, George McIntyre, Matt Zollers, all guys that are currently ranked ahead of him. Your expectations over 3 days in LA next week?
I think we come out of there and we like where we have him ranked. So right now, kind of day 2, round 2 type of grade on him. And if you go in our system, there's a video from me and you like 2 months ago saying, hey, is Deuce Knight Lagway? And remember, DJ Lagway, the 5-star quarterback, finished as the number 1 quarterback for us. We came out of the Elite 11 finals, liked what we saw, wasn't the most consistent, and then he shot up the board with a monster senior season there at Willis. So I think it's going to be some ebbs and flows, but man, if he goes out there in all 3 days, I'm talking rail shot challenge, 7-on-7, the scripted pro day, and blows our mind, how do we not push him up into that upper tier with some of these other quarterbacks, with your Matt Zollers, with your Keelan Russell, with your Hassan Longstreet? So I'm expecting a big kind of weekend or week from him when we get out to LA. And I was joking around with him. Deuce is a fun personality. I've spent, I don't know, this is like the 3rd time this offseason kind of around him all weekend, and he's fired up and he's kind of relaxed and loose heading into it. I think the most interesting thing that kind of came out of the weekend is this Ole Miss stuff is real. I know it's not my lane. We'll leave that up to Tom Loy. But there was a ton of Ole Miss buzz, and I think people were tweeting out videos, hey, Deuce Knight, and there was a lot of Notre Dame fans replying real quick, you mean Notre Dame commit Deuce Knight? So I think it's something to track, and it goes with the theme of this cycle, Cooper. There's so much potential quarterback movement heading into the Elite 11 finals, and I can't recall when it has been like this in terms of all these high-profile arms potentially looking at other places, right? You got Julian Lewis, Tramel Jones has been linked to Florida. So I think it's going to set up for a fun week out there in LA.
Well, I'm excited to see it. It's going to be the barometer for these guys, especially the best arms in the country. Deuce Knight, certainly a lot of momentum heading into the event. Drew, the one thing that we wanted to see from Deuce Knight this offseason was consistency. That's been the biggest key for him, and that's what he has done this offseason, is put together consistent performance one after the other, continues to get better. The biggest thing for me, Drew, despite what we shall or shall not see next week in LA at the Elite 11 finals, I want to see all this positive momentum that he has built up over the offseason carry on to the field. That's the biggest question. And the other point to this, you brought up the DJ Lagway comparison. DJ Lagway, as you continuously bring up, was just okay at the Elite 11 finals. On the field, though, over 3 years, continue to get better and better, and that's really ultimately where it counts the most. So Deuce Knight, big opportunity next week, but certainly beyond that as well, because I know a lot of people, they're gonna tie this to the rankings. For me, yes, Elite 11 is one exposure point. Deuce Knight, we've been fortunate. We've gotten to see a lot of them this offseason, but it's still, for me, the senior season is going to be really, really important when you're trying to put the puzzle pieces together in what is the evaluation of Deuce Knight.
Absolutely, Cooper. I think you're right. I mean, I mentioned the DJ Lagway. He had the best high school season out of anyone in America last year. Max Preps Player of the Year, Gatorade Player of the Year. We'll see if Deuce Knight has that in him. Other thing on Deuce Knight, real quick. I know we're under the gun here. We got a lot of names to get to, but Adidas was partnered with the event. They had some guys from Exos there. They were testing some of these kids with some new technology, like behind the scenes. So they brought me back and they were explaining it to me. They were comparing some of these guys to the NFL data. Deuce Knight, well, I think had the second best like explosive metric out of all the kids there that they had tested. And these guys at Exos, I mean, they're the ones that train the NFL draft individuals. And it was a super interesting kind of like presentation. And the entire time in the back of my head, I'm like, well, yeah, he's got a 40-inch vertical jump. I think we kind of knew that Deuce Knight was explosive, but no, they were just talking about like long-term and what they're able to do. Deuce Knight also had like 2 30-yard runs in a 7-on-7 setting. You can blitz, and he took off. I mean, it was a impressive performance. You fall in love with the athlete. I'm starting to fall in love with the passer.
I think you said it best, right? The passer's always been the question mark. We'll wait and see. A lot of Deuce Knight love here, especially the first 10 minutes of the show, as you can expect. A lot going on with him. Ole Miss appears not to be going away. Notre Dame doing their best as well. So we're going to make an interesting recruitment here over the next couple of months. All right, Joe, let's go to this receiver group. And what a talented one and what an intriguing group. You got Talon Taylor, Donovan Olabode, Jamie French, Vernell Brown. I mean, you're talking about 4 of the most premier receivers in the country, 4 of the most dynamic players in the country, and all kind of give you something a little bit different. Talon Taylor, Olabode, Jamie French has kind of been status quo near the top of the board, especially at the receiver board. And Vernell Brown, 3 out of the 4 of those guys at that receiver group, Drew, are all guys that rose in the rankings for us in the most recent Top 247 update. Just your overall impressions of that group and maybe, quick one-liner on what stood out with each of them.
Well, it's different flavors, right? And I said it on the front end. I thought OT7, it was kind of like validation for how I see the wide receiver board. And I know we didn't get all the premium pass catchers out there. And Coop, I continue to say this behind the scenes. I think stacking these wide receivers here in the 2025 cycle is the hardest position for us to figure it out, right? We're going to have 36 inside the top 247 probably when we get to January. Where do we want to take our calculated shots? We are going to miss, right? There is absolutely kids we're going to rank as 3 stars that outplay the rankings. There's going to be guys inside the top 247 that we get wrong, right? That fizzle out at the next level. For me, having seen those 4 you just mentioned, Jamie French, Talon Taylor, Donovan Olabode, and Vernell Brown. Hey, if we miss on them, okay, we didn't get it right. Like after seeing these guys, and most of them, it was the second exposure point or third exposure point for me this spring. I feel good about where we have them ranked. Talon Taylor, the tape, you turn it on, limited, injured his MCL there as a junior up in Illinois. I think he has, looked excellent this offseason, explosive cuts. Talked with some people on the collegiate side. They said kind of the same thing. All right, the tape really doesn't do it for you, but when you see him this spring work out, you get fired up. I think Georgia's in a great spot there. I know Ohio State has also been linked to him, was talking to his mother in between one of the games. Talon actually played some DB, had like a one-handed interception. I think if he ends up at Georgia, this is the type of receiver that they need to bring in, right? Someone that can, be a number 2 and be explosive, run that post route. So talented like him. Jamie French, I don't know what Jamie French necessarily is like elite at, but every time you watch him play, you're like, okay, I want that guy in my wide receiver room. He's got college-ready size. He's a polished route runner. Might not have like a true top-end gear, but I thought his ability to make defensive backs and linebackers miss. And again, it's two-hand touch. So if you're getting out of these tackles, it's kind of impressive. So what he did after the catch, I baked that into my live exposure when I saw his spring game. He had that one-handed touchdown catch. Feeling good about Jamie French. Vernell Brown, they had that vertical jump competition. Got some questions about the validity on that in terms of how they measured it. But Vernell Brown won with a 35.5-inch vert. He was the shortest guy that jumped. So I guess he technically would have, or I don't know. Me and Bud Elliott were going back and forth about how they were measuring this. But he's explosive, and he won a jump ball in the end zone. And it's like, okay, I didn't know Vernell Brown had that. He's a three-phase guy. I think he's at Miami right now for an official visit. Florida State's in there. Florida's in there where he's a legacy. I love it because it's a throwback big three recruiting battle. Ohio State also in there. I think if he ends up at Florida and you're a Gators fan, whatever UF and Billy Napier have done with Trey Wilson is what they're going to do with Vernell Brown if he were to end up there. And I don't know I brought that up in the past, but after seeing him again, feel confident about that. And then Donovan Olabode, Coop, this is your guy, right? We always say he's got 11-inch hands. Well, when do 11-inch hands matter? He made this one-handed snag, just didn't even have to gear down, one-handed snag, just turned it right upfield with this big paw. I think he was wearing a USC glove. Wiggle on him. Again, another guy with college-ready size. I like those four kind of different flavors. I think three of the four are from the state of Florida. You got two Illinois natives in there. It's a fun group. And I think we're learning more about this wide receiver board.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a fun group. Taylor, Olabode, French, Vernell Brown. I believe all those guys inside the top 100 at this point. Maybe Talent Taylor's outside of it. I need to double check that. But
He's inside. He's inside.
Dynamic group. Talent Taylor, a guy that you love. So I think the one thing that's interesting that I love to hear from you is when you leave an event. Typically, when you leave an event, you give me a call and we kind of debrief and we go through it. But you said, I walked away from this weekend and there was no surprises. There was really nothing out there that kind of jumped out to me. The guys that we thought were good were really good. The guys that we were maybe a little bit down on were kind of trending that direction from what you kind of took away from the weekend. Does that kind of stand true for what you saw Friday to Sunday?
Absolutely. And, we say our rankings are a fluid process. You try to come in without some type of bias, right? But it feels good when the guys that you have ranked high are the ones that are performing and the ones that are making plays and the ones that you're like, if I'm assembling a roster, I want these guys on my team. And, again, all of them are going to get senior seasons. I think we're going to get all these guys in some type of All-American Bowl setting, hopefully. Last year, the postseason all-star events were huge when it came to stacking the wide receiver board. I think we're going to hopefully, fingers crossed, we get it again because I think a lot of these guys are going to end up at college football playoff teams.
All right, let's take a look at some of the underclassmen on offense that were turning heads. 2026, Vance Spafford, and then Drew, the 2027, Mark Bowman. I don't want to say he has gone viral over the last 24, 48 hours in the college football recruiting world, but for a guy like me that hasn't dove into 2027 yet, I am now familiar with the name. Tell me what you think of these two guys.
Spafford, set records at Mission Viejo as a sophomore. I mean, he's undersized, but he is a guy that can get open. And you wonder, okay, what about the top end speed? You dig into the track profile. I think he's got 6 sub-11-second efforts in the 100-meter dash. He's a slot receiver. He's a technician with his footwork, finds, soft spots and coverage. I think he's a name to know, certainly in 2026. Is he going to be a wide receiver one somewhere? Probably not. But I think in a spread attack, modern spread attack, he certainly can carve out a role there for a West Coast school or someone, east of the Mississippi as well. Mark Bowman is the guy I want to talk about. Kendra Harrison was there, our number one ranked. Is he athlete or tight end in the 2026 cycle? I think tight end. Tight end,
I was
right?
going to say athlete, but I'll go back and double check.
Yeah, Kendra Harrison, the Max Preps National Player of the Year. We've talked about him. He could play basketball, he could play football in coverage or in college. He didn't really do a lot out there. Didn't play a ton of series, and really, it was so easy to select Mark Bowman for this quote unquote dream team. And you're going to hear it now. I've already heard it. the player comps to Brock Bowers, it's going to be nauseating how much you hear those two linked together, because Bowman is a West Coast based pass catcher that is someone who can elevate a passing attack. He was a threat in the red zone. He was drawing double coverage by the end of the tournament. He is 6'4.5", 220 pounds, 4'6" on the lasers in the 40-yard dash, 4'3" in the short shuttle. He's a box checker. Played as a freshman at Mater Day. I think kind of just how he moves, fluid, spatial awareness. He's the real deal, Cooper. And yeah, 2027 rankings not coming out until August. Go ahead and count Mark Bowman being in that top 100, that initial top 100.
All right, so I'm a guy that hasn't seen Mark Bowman. I haven't done my research yet. I read your story. I saw Brock Bowers' name kind of come up. I know you don't throw that around lightly because there's a lot of respect for Brock Bowers and who he is in the scouting community, not only because he's a multi-dimensional tight end and one of the best pass-catching tight ends that we have seen in college football in quite some time, but his high school tape at Napa High School in California, he did everything. He played quarterback, he played running back, he played obviously tight end, receiver, returned punts, returned kicks, played outside linebacker, played linebacker off ball as well, second level. Maybe some of the best high school tape I've ever seen. My question on Mark Bowman is there any type of concern that, all right, he's a 2027, so he's going to be a rising sophomore next year. Like, what's this guy going to look like in 3 years? Like, is he going to still grow into this frame? Is there 3 years of development left? Or is like, hey, maybe in a year from now, I don't know how much more juice he's got left physically.
Well, I think that's a fair concern. And I'll add in here, there's already some talk about him potentially moving to 2026. And you're right. That's the difference between Bowman and Bowers. Bowers was returning kickoffs for touchdowns when he was in high school. I don't think Bowman is going to do that at a loaded Mater Day program where it's rare to see guys pull double duty, even triple duty. Like you got to be an elite talent. I certainly think that's a valid question, right? We're not trying to rank the best high school football players. We're trying to get it right when 4 or 5, well, for him, it would be like 6, 7 years down the line when the NFL draft is.
Yeah. You think you and I will still be doing this 6, 7 years from now? That's a real question. But yeah, Mark Bowman, the type of guy for sure that when projection comes into play when you're trying to figure that out. All right, Drew, before we flip over to the defensive side of the ball, guys, guess what? We have a guest on our show, at least in the chat, that is national recruiting analyst Tom Loy, to be answering all your questions. So we get a lot of questions. A lot of them have to do with where is player X heading? Where is he trending? Tom, what is the latest? Tom Loy is in the chat answering questions, one of the best in the business. Make sure to take advantage of that. All right, Drew. Now we flip to the defensive side of the ball on this dream team. And what's pretty funny, I had to go back. I had to double check. The first guy on this list, 2026, Derek Cooper, he was committed to Georgia, I think over the weekend, June 6th, right? And decommitted last night on June 10th. And Tom Lloyd told me that that was potentially going to happen. So a quick commitment, a quick decommitment as well. He's back on the market. Devin Sanchez, Dejon Lee, Grayson Littleton, Gregory Zay Thomas, Amari Wallace, Braylon Womack, CJ Sadler. There you see the list. 2 commitments within that group. Devin Sanchez to Ohio State, Grayson Littleton as well. Drew, I want to start maybe with those 2 corners because those are 2 guys that we've talked about a lot. And I think one guy has kind of played his way into our hearts a little bit in Grayson Littleton, the Clemson commit. The other one we've long had an infatuation with. I think these exposure points during this part of the recruiting timeline are important because they remind you why you love the guy as much as you do. I got that feel reading your article with Devin Sanchez.
He looked like how a number 1 ranked corner should look. One of our favorite prospects in the cycle. One of the guys we feel the best about. Devin Sanchez had 3 interceptions. All of them were kind of freaky plays in terms of him just climbing imaginary ladders. He is a risk taker. Like, that's my assessment of him coming out of the junior season there at Houston North Shore. And it played out right in front of me. Like, he will come off coverage. He will bait quarterbacks into bad decisions. And when he does, it is a turnover. Not a ton of targets come his way. Coop, he is all of 6'2". Love him in like off man, very fluid in the lower half. And he creates plays. He shuts down one side of the field. And then when you think, all right, he ain't going to pick this ball off, he goes up and he gets it. So I thought Devin Sanchez lived up to the hype. We've talked about this behind the scenes. Him and Naeem Offord, who was also committed to Ohio State. I know he's looking around, taking some visits. I mean, if Ohio State gets these two, it's almost unfair. And then you think about Columbus, the practices there with Jeremiah Smith and all those other wide receivers, like sign me up to get some access to that practice footage over the next few years. I love to see those battles in practice. So I thought Devin Sanchez, highest ranked prospect in attendance, looked the part. I mean, if there was an overall MVP, I think it would probably go to him. You can make a case for Deuce Knight, but Devin Sanchez was the real deal. The two other corners, really three of them, I said it with the wide receivers. You feel validated. Same thing here, right? About where we have guys on the board. Grayson Littleton initially was not going to be in overtime OT7. He was supposed to be at Alabama on official visit. Well, he canceled that because he committed to Clemson. Talking with him, he just felt like the Tigers were the spot for him. Coop, he was awesome on Sunday. I think he had one interception, maybe two interceptions, multiple pass breakups, had a sack, rare to do there in the 7-on-7 setting, but he came screaming from the hot corner and got the quarterback, tagged him down. He isn't, you get around him. We know he's under 6 foot, but he is a tall 5'11", maintains phase. I thought it was an excellent weekend for him. That is a great pickup for Dabo. Dijon Lee, 6'4", guy can jump out of the building. He had multiple pass breakups. His team kind of got eliminated early on Sunday, so it's easy to kind of forget about him. But I thought when we saw him, he was excellent. He's a guy that was in the conversation for a 5th star, freaky athlete, freaky athlete. I think someone we're going to keep a close eye on this upcoming fall, and then or hopefully get him in an all-star game. I know Alabama's in there, Washington, Texas A&M. He's going to visit Georgia next week, and it's easy to see why these schools are after him. And then finally, this Gregory Zay Thomas kid, Coop, talking to his dad actually stayed at the same hotel as us. I wish I had the photo. His dad's like, hey, I got to show you this photo. It's me and Gregory Zay Thomas 4 years ago at an FBU camp during COVID. I'm like wearing like one of those, face masks. And he's like, this was Greg before he had 0 offers. Awesome story, right? He's like 46% Native American. He'll be one of the first, if not the first, Native Americans to earn a college football scholarship and play as at the Power 4 level. He's also got ties to Clemson. When he was a kid, he was in the hospital, fighting for his life. Clemson was down in the Orange Bowl. The team came into the hotel and, when they are on the bowl trip, and gave him a bunch of gear. So he's down to FSU and the Clemson Tigers. And Greg Zay Thomas, I thought he was kind of a safety, thinking he's a corner after watching him out there. He kind of locked up Chris Henry Jr. for a game. We saw that last fall when he matched up with Jeremiah Smith. Just an easy kid to root for, college-ready size. I think he can play in a boundary role. Really good weekend from him as well.
Pretty crazy story, talking about Gregory Zay Thomas there, especially the Clemson connections and obviously the Native American background. Fascinating. But I thought the two things that stood out the most when you're evaluating the player, I haven't done a lot of research on him, but the thing that kind of pops for me and wants me to turn on the tape and say, all right, let's get invested in this player, is the two names that you mentioned on the other side of the ball. You mentioned Chris Henry Jr., the number 2 ranked player in 2026, and then Jeremiah Smith, the best receiver we've seen at the position in a long time. So for him to match up with those guys, because we kind of know the mismatch problems and all the havoc that Jeremiah Smith has caused for defenders over the last 3 years. So to even be on equal footing is something that you kind of remember and you say, okay, this guy's obviously got some natural ability here. So jam-packed. Dijon Lee, I want to go back to him for a second. Calculated shot, I don't know. Maybe, if you think back to our rankings and where we have him now tucked inside the top 50, a little bit closer to that 5-star status. Pleased overall with where we have him ranked?
Yeah, I mean, he also played some receiver. I think he got free on a deep shot there. Look, if you're going to be a cornerback that's over 6'4" or even over 6'3". You got to be a freaky athlete. He is that. He's got what, 46 in the triple jump. I was talking to him about that. He's like, I have no idea what I'm doing out there. I could probably, jump in college and, get closer to 50 if I wanted to go that route, but he is going to play football. I thought he was physical, Cooper, just in terms of getting his hands on there. I think one of my takeaways that I haven't put in writing, but I guess I'll do it on this space. I don't know how big of a gap there is between DJ Pickett and Dijon Lee. And I think some people are like, whoa, Dijon's not a 5-star. DJ Pickett is a 5-star. I don't think there's that sizable of a gap, having dug into the tape between the two, having seen them in this type of setting, knowing their profiles. I mean, DJ Pickett's also a big track guy. And I know a lot of the same schools that are involved with Dijon Lee were in it with DJ Pickett. That was kind of one of my takeaways coming out of the weekend.
Andrew leaving some breadcrumbs there. It's funny if you look at it from like an NFL draft standpoint. I mean, beauty's always in the eye of the beholder, right? So when you're comparing those two, yeah, you got one guy maybe in the 40s, another guy tucked inside the top 10, but the difference is kind of minuscule at this point. That's why the senior season going to be an important evaluation as well. Drew, as we round out a couple of these safeties, Amari Wallace, Braylon Womack, certainly been a really hot name here at 24/7 Sports, and then CJ Sadler. Any thoughts on those guys?
Amari Wallace, I think big weekend for him, right? And he's someone we've talked about on this space, was higher up in the rankings. We got more of a day 3 grade on him. He is not big. I mean, he is 5'9", pushing 5'10". I think he is the ideal split safety prospect. I love him on tape, but to see him kind of match up some of these bigger wide receivers and redirect them, I thought that was important. Look, if you're going to be an undersized safety in today's age, you got to be able to cover and you got to be able to do man coverage, right? I just think he is someone that offers a ton of versatility on the back end. He's going to take an official visit to Miami. Think about him, kind of see some Cam Kitchens in his game. He's also going to take an official visit to Louisville, who does an excellent job down in Miami-Dade County. I know you look at him, the measurements, the size, kind of you're like, all right, maybe we could find someone bigger, but I think he's a football player. And I think most importantly, he can play and hang in man coverage. So good weekend for Amari Wallace. And then CJ Sadler, one of our top ranked athletes in 2026. He had to play like quarterback for Team Flow. That's Bryce Underwood's squad. He wasn't out there. Thrust into action at quarterback. Made some throws. Like, I don't know. I know he's an underclassman, but you think about what he could be in college, jet sweeps, double passes. I think his future is as a slot corner. And he actually told me some of the schools are recruiting him for that role. Think about Michigan, right? They have what they do with those undersized slot inside corners. They churn them out at a very high level. And I think CJ Sadler would be a perfect fit for what they want to do on defense.
So there you have it, OT7 Finals Recap, also the OT7 Dream Team from Andrew Ivins, our Director of Scouting here at 24/7 Sports. Just a reminder, you can find that on 247sports.com. A great way to spend your morning reading up on some literature from the very best at what he does. And with that being said, guys, you want to talk about great opportunities. How about 24/7 Sports right now? Promo 60% off annual VIP subscriptions to 247sports.com. That ends tonight at midnight Eastern. Make sure to jump on that. Once in a lifetime opportunity. I might be overselling it there, but you get my point. We're excited about it. Drew, now it's time to get to the busy weekend in the transaction wire. We said it was going to be a busy couple weeks, and it has been, because we've seen those official visits, and a lot of those are ending in commitment. So let's take a look at some of the top 247 commitments since Saturday, and there is no shortage of them. Starting at the top, Fahim Delane, number 50 player in the country, number 4 safety to Ohio State. You have Darius Dixon to Penn State, the corner out of Mater Dei. Chuck McDonald, another corner to Alabama. Dalen Pinson to Georgia Tech. Love that get. We'll talk about that here in a second. Zaire Addison to Oregon. Todd Robinson to Georgia. Christian Garrett to Georgia. Tariq Hayer to Rutgers. Hayden Lowe to USC. So the big boys getting it going. Rutgers, if you listen to the show, they continue to do what they do. Greg Schiano and the boys keeping it rolling. And a couple others of note. McKeel Skinner to Cincinnati. We love him. Michael Carroll to Alabama. Jaquan Holman to South Carolina. Juju Marks to Kansas. Timothy Merritt to Miami. Sam Turner to Georgia Tech. So if any of those guys committed to your team, we're going to get to those guys over the next half hour. Drew, go ahead. I know you got
Yeah, I
something.
know. T-Box is yours, man. I just cooked on OT7. Where do you
You
want to
did
go?
cook. I want to start. I want to start at the top. Let's start with Fahim Delaney, and I think this one is really interesting because Fahim Delaney is not as talked about as a Devin Sanchez or not as talked about as a Naeem Offord, but you plug him in that secondary with two guys that can shut it down on either side of the football. Fahim Delaney is kind of the perfect complementary piece when you talk about a versatile kind of nickel strong safety defender that really excels closer to the line of scrimmage. Heady player, football instincts, and the biggest impression that I took away from Fahim Delaney was when we saw him at Future 50 a year ago. I thought he was one of the best players there, pound for pound. Now the upside and the speed, sure he can get dinged on that, but he's a football player, and I love that. I think you have to have that, especially when you're building in the back end of the defense. And he can hang in coverage. I think he can match up with bigger body receivers, tight ends. I think he'll be okay there. But like just the disposition of this kid, I I just truly like this kid. And I forget who you were talking about earlier. I think it was Jamie French, right? Um, Fahim Delaney to me is one of those guys. Like, yeah, I don't know where he ends up in the rankings. I don't want to overthink it. I want this dude on my football team.
My takeaway here, right? Already kind of dished on the two corners they got committed. Devin Sanchez, Naeem Offord, cheat code, not fair, no fly zone. What are they going to call it if they get those two? They got zone 6 on for the wide receiver room. What are they going to call the secondary? Like,
I don't know. I mean, when's the last time you can remember a combination like Sanchez and Offord? You know,
someone pointed this out. Like Ohio State did it, I think 5-6 years ago. I don't know the two corners. Here's my take on Fahim Delaney. I think he's more of a box safety. I think line of scrimmage league in the Big Ten, guy that can get those large running backs on the ground. And then pairing him with Deshaun Stewart, who was also at OT7, was not on my initial roster. Kid makes an interception. I'm like, whoa, who the hell is that? It's Deshaun Stewart, the Ohio State safety commit out of New Jersey. I just love this secondary group. I mean, we've talked about it at length. Playmakers. I mean, this is what you want it to look like.
Ohio State's rolling. You know, the Alabama fans will probably be like, well, we had 3 5-stars last year. And you did. You had Mbakwe, you had Xavier Brown, and you had Zay Mincy. These two, ironically, are just ranked inside the top 10. I guess I'm just talking like quality of talent. And it's hard to even say that when you're talking about 3 5-stars in the prior class. But, you know.
Mbakwe was a guy that hasn't played much DB. Xavier Brown, love him, obviously. And then Zay Mincy, it's kind of like, okay, you know, is he a safety? Is he a guy with versatility? Sanchez and Offord are height, weight, speed corners all the way. Just kind of a different conversation with them. But yes, love the Alabama group. Those two are just kind of a little bit different, I think.
All right, let's talk about modern day in the two DBs. Speaking of, I mean, we're talking about Xavier Brown, so it's a nice transition into Darius Dixon to Penn State, Chuck McDonald to Alabama. The first thing that kind of comes into my mind, hey, these guys are going east. You know, we're going to Darius Dixon's flying a long way to go play his college football in State College. Chuck McDonald going to play in the SEC. You obviously understand the California modern day ties to Tuscaloosa in that program. Xavier Brown, we mentioned Damani Jackson as well in that secondary. So you understand that. You take anything away from that? Just, you know, I don't know. It always comes to mind, and maybe sometimes I'm a little bit too harsh, a little bit too critical on USC, but I immediately that's kind of where my mind goes. You got these type of players, at least in our mind, that we see as, you know, top 150 caliber defensive backs, and they're going a long way from home to go play somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, Penn State going out to California, I thought that was interesting when it came across my ticker. And, you know, there's someone that last cycle had a ton of success down in Florida getting those two corners out of Jacksonville Mandarin, right? Antonio Belgrave Shorter with John Mitchell, those two. Just notable that they're going all the way out there for Dixon. To me, like that secondary there, at Mater Day. I think you're getting guys that are pretty polished. Like these guys can play football. They can cover. They've been doing it. They've been coached up really well. Dixon, a little bit taller than McDonald. I think both of them can fit a variety of different systems. They're off the board. What are you hinting at here? That where's USC? Is that what you're kind of bringing up?
It's not like a where's USC, but yeah, I mean, this is one of the worst defenses in college football. And they bring on DeAnton Lynn, and I understand it. Like they're in the midst of changes, and I've just kind of been curious there. USC has so much potential to me. Now they're moving to the Big Ten. They should be a dominant recruiting program, and you see them right, like you see the flashes of what they can be. Obviously, a Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson, a Julian Lewis, they can get it going. I think in this era, it's more about all right, can they finish? But defensively, that would be a big. If I was at USC, it's a premium position where you have those guys at home. You want to be able to take advantage of it.
Well, they got Tristan Castro committed, top 247 corner. So they got one true corner, at least how we see it on the board in that number 5 class. No, it's certainly, I don't know, conversation you revisit a few years down the line, depending on how these guys pan out.
Sure. I mean, Adonis Curry, right, to Texas A&M. Beal Goins from Arizona in the footprint to A&M, right? Those are things that kind of come up a little bit, but nonetheless, Penn State, Alabama getting 2 really good defensive backs there. Drew, how about this one? Dalen Pinson, number 120 for us, number 14 corner. I was scrolling through, I was looking at all the recent commitments, and I see Dalen Pinson to Georgia Tech, and this guy, I think size going to get dinged a little bit, but just in terms of the athlete, what he can do, the versatility, plays a little bit of safety. He can roll. Brent Keys kind of caught my eyes here. There's a couple other guys that have come up recently on our discussion board that have popped at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech and Houston right now have all my attention just in terms of teams doing really, really good scouting. I love this take for Georgia Tech. And the other thing is, I love this decision for Dalen Pinson. I think it's an ideal fit for him as well.
I don't think it's a take, man. It's a win. It's
huge
like,
win. Yes.
Yeah, you took your shot and you got him on the board. Dalen Pinson's dad, decathlete at Georgia. Mom was a sprinter for the Bulldogs. He worked out for UGA, I think, the first week kind of that summer evaluation period. You're right, on the smaller side, but decorated track and field athlete, has tested off the charts. Hudson Standish, our guy, saw him at the Under Armour camp in Atlanta alongside us, and we're kind of like, whoa, who's this guy? And he's one of the ones where you put on the tape from that workout and he just moves a little bit different than everyone else. Yeah, I love the pickup for Georgia Tech. And then they also got Sam Turner, wide receiver, over the weekend, 3-star for us. We talk about that wide receiver board. Sam Turner on the younger side, multi-sport athlete, big-bodied wide receiver. Nice little weekend for the Yellow Jackets. Sit number 25 in the rankings right now.
Let's go, man. That fires me up. Georgia Tech on the move. All right, a couple more. Zaire Addison, top 150 tackle, number 14 tackle in the country, to Oregon. Drew, you're familiar with this kid. Went back, buzzed the tape this morning. This just seems like one for Oregon where it's like, yeah, it kind of makes sense for what they're looking like from a Clay standpoint. Has all the physical tools, going to need some development, but certainly with what they brought in that room, offensive line coach Alik Terry has done a wonderful job. Oregon seems one of those teams are willing to bet big and be patient with the traits on the offensive line.
I think it's notable. You want to talk about teams going across the country, right? And I don't know where Zaire Addison was on the board for Miami, Florida State. Seems like I had heard early on the kid was kind of feeling maybe some of the West Coast schools. And there was UCLA smoke. And then, Coop, I was at USF on Thursday, right? They had this mega camp before OT7. Well, I turn around and Georgia had a coach there. And that's because Zaire Addison had showed up and Georgia wanted to get some FaceTime with Zaire Addison before I think he took an official visit to Eugene. Was he in Eugene over the weekend? And then, a few days later, he's committed to the Ducks. I think this makes sense for them and the fact that Oregon will go pay for premium guys in the transfer portal, right, at those tackle spots. Now they're trying to grow someone in-house in Zaire Addison. I think he's a capable move blocker. I think he needs to improve his pass, protection technique, which is normally the case with a lot of these guys. But you look at the features, 36-inch arms. Who knows how accurate that measurement is, but he's long. I've been around him. He's lean. To me, right tackle, I think, is where his future is, but he could be athletic enough to play on the left side. And there was a point where we had him as an interior projection as well. So Dan Lanning and the Ducks, I think they only have like 8 commits right now. To me, they're kind of stealing a premium body from, one of the most talent-rich states that typically doesn't produce offensive linemen.
Yeah, interesting get, and they kind of know what they're doing. I remember you calling me saying, "Hey, I think Oregon's doing some good things with Zaire Addison." Obviously, he ends up committed to the Ducks. Drew, Georgia. You always talked about Jimbo Fisher. I remember you always talked about him taking the car out of the garage. Well, it seems like Georgia, Saban. I'm sorry. But it seems like Georgia, Kirby Smart are doing that as well. Todd Robinson, top 247 running back, ranked number 155, number 7 running back in the country. I've just confirmed safety, more than likely going to be his new home at UGA. And then Christian Garrett, the defensive lineman, top 247 defensive lineman that we like a lot, top 25 of the position group. You get the feel that Georgia really, really likes what they have with both of these in-state guys. These were guys that Todd Robinson, a more recent top 247 entry, Christian Garrett, I think, I don't want to say we're flying blind, but not a lot of information around him. The more you get, the more that you like. Long, lean guy, athletic, can play multiple spots, kind of fits what they do. Georgia, I don't know. You talk about programs that just know who they are. These are 2 guys that kind of fit.
Yeah, and Todd Robinson, you heard safety. I heard after he worked out for Georgia, running back, wide receiver, kick returner, safety, corner, whatever the heck he wants to play. This is a guy that we want in the building. Tested off the charts for them. We have him listed as a running back. This is on us because we meant to move him to athlete last week. That move did not happen. So all the Georgia viewers out there, listeners to the show, we are changing him to an athlete. That is an oversight from us. But hey, when you're on the road for 4 days, things slip through the cracks. No, I mean, keeping the best in state. I think Todd Robinson was only going to have more options as we got closer to the end of the month. A lot of schools are trying to bring him in on visits. Georgia gets him to shut it down. Kind of reminds me of the Zayden Walker situation. Like Zayden Walker going to take these visits. No. You're not taking any visits. You're coming to play for the Bulldogs. That's a big one. And then Christian Garrett, I don't think the tape matches the athlete just yet. And Georgia is going to be able to get the most out of him.
All right. 2 more top 247 guys, and then we'll get to a couple other guys of note that we kind of want to hit on. Any thoughts on Tariq Hay or Hayden Lowe?
Hayden Lowe, man. When I kind of was auditing the top 247 before this last update, big fan. You're kind of dogging USC a few minutes ago. This is one where I don't think it's like insurance in case something happens with Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson, the 2 5-stars that are committed to the Trojans from the Peach State that took visits to Georgia. They are lurking in the shadows with those 2. But Hayden Lowe, like, this is what USC needs to keep home. He's got the measurables. I think someone with a very, very high developmental ceiling. Another one where it's not all there right now. But I thought that one was notable when Tom Loy told me on Sunday, and I'm sweating and looking for a Gatorade. He's like, "Oh, USC's getting Hayden Lowe." I'm like, "Oh, that's a big deal."
I'm not dogging him. I will say this. There's certain programs, historically, traditionally, that, at least in my own opinion, that I hold to a really high standard, because I think USC year in and year out can be one of the best recruiting programs in the country, without a doubt. And I think it's consistency, at least in my opinion, that I kind of yearn for in the trenches. So Hayden Lowe, certainly a step in the right direction. We talk about it all the time. You got to keep those big bodies home when you have the chance to do that. Drew, a couple other guys I just want to give us both a little bit of time to kind of hit on, because we like to get in the weeds. But let's start at the top. Mikkel Skinner, to Cincinnati, number 14 tight end in the country, newly minted 4-star as well. Got to see him at UA Charlotte a couple weeks back. I mean, you talk about a big physical kid, jumbo athlete, 6'4 plus, can do a little bit of everything, plays quarterback, plays running back, plays receiver. All due respect to Cincinnati, I had no idea how they got their hands on this one. And I don't know if everybody else is kind of caught up to Mikael Skinner. And I think this is going to be one of those recruitments for Scott Satterfield, his staff. All power to him, right? These are the type of guys that you need to kind of change the outlook of your program. I think this is a guy right here that people are going to come back to. It will come across their commit wire. They'll see Mikael Skinner to Cincinnati. They'll dive in. They'll start to see what he's put on tape over the offseason. And it's going to be one of those whoa moments. Maybe this is a guy that we need to go back in on.
Yeah, what, 4.6 in the 40-yard dash at 225 pounds?
4.59.
4.59, yeah. And then double digits on the hardwood, like led his team to a state title or at least the state championship game, double, I think, in the final. I wrote down after watching him like Jaheim Bell, Elijah Lofton, who I know Josh Pate on his show keeps talking up Elijah Lofton. I was talking with some Miami staffers over the weekend, like Elijah Lofton, are you playing college football fantasy or you're in a dynasty league? Get that guy drafted, circled, whatever you need to do now. I also wrote down Olsen Pat Henry, who we loved in the top 247, signed with Clemson. Look, he's like an H-back move tight end. I don't know what he's going to be like as an inline blocker, but I don't think you need to do that with Skinner. Catch and run is there. You said it, play some running back. I love this pickup. Only space that's going to be talking about a Cincinnati commit, but this is a notable one. And Satterfield, you think about him, the offensive mind, I think they can get creative with him, and he could be a mismatch in the Big 12.
All right, let's talk about Michael Carroll, number 15 IOL as well. Another newly minted 4-star as well. He comes off the board to Alabama. Some new numbers on him: 6'6" a quarter, 315, 34-inch arms, almost a 7-foot wing, 11-inch hands, and 17 size shoe. This is a big dude and a big athlete as well. But Drew, Michael Carroll, I have not dug in on the tape yet. I think that was one of those guys I missed last week, but kind of seems to fit what we like and what everybody else likes.
Right. And I thought Georgia was going to get him. And then, Brett Greenberg hit me up on our Alabama site. Hey, Michael Carroll's committing to the Crimson Tide. I'm like, whoa, okay. I thought this guy was signed, sealed, and delivered to Georgia, who hoards mass. And Brett was asking me, like, okay, what is this a Nick Saban take? You always use that term. Would Nick Saban take Michael Carroll? And I was thinking about it. Alabama had like a bunch of offensive linemen committed in this cycle. And then, Nick Saban retired. I think they've all decommitted. I would rank this guy ahead of all of them. I don't even have the names in front of me. I was thinking about that as I was driving this morning. Love what I've seen from him so far. And, we got new measurements on him, new data points. One of my favorite kind of interior offensive linemen that I've watched in this cycle. I think he's a guy that can continue to rise up the board. You said it, 11-inch hands. Dad played at Penn State. Mom played basketball at Michigan State. He is a road grader. I think, one of the guard spots, potentially tackle in a pinch. But, man, he can pull and he could put someone on their back. So I love that take for Alabama. And really with the Crimson Tide, they get Keelan Russell. And you look at that recruiting class, which is sitting in the top 10. Up until the Keelan Russell flip, it was really focused on the defensive side of the ball. And you're kind of wondering, okay, what are they going to do on offense? And to me, Keelan Russell, now you got a potential multi-year starter and Michael Carroll on the offensive line. Excited to see what else they can kind of piece together with that group.
Done some good things. Hats off to Kalen DeBoer, his staff over there. Alabama continuing to put the foot on the gas pedal when it comes to recruiting, answering a lot of questions there. All right, Drew, 3 more. Jaquel Holman to South Carolina, a fun two-way guy. Love that take for the Gamecocks. Juju Marks to Kansas. We've been told there's not enough Kansas love on here. We like that one a lot. And Timothy Merritt to Miami. We know we always got some Canes fans lurking on this pod. But let's start with Holman, Drew. We don't have to spend too much time on him, but this is kind of one of those where, like, I think you come back 3 or 4 years from now, it's kind of like, where'd this dude kind of come from? But if you look at his tape, you kind of have to put the pieces together very carefully. And then when the picture comes into focus, it's pretty easy to get excited about Jaquel Holman.
All right, this is gonna be a spicy flamer. Are you ready for it?
Let's do it.
I'm not comparing him to this, but all right, if me and you were running the department at South Carolina, I would be trying to take like the back end of my class, like the best athletes I could in the state. And I think Jaquel Hallman, state champ in the 100 and the 200. All right, what is he? Is he a linebacker? Is he a DB? Is he a running back? I mean, this was a kid that like a month ago was going to junior days at the Citadel, right? Comes on a South Carolina's radar. They get him on campus. They work him out. Bam, he's committed. I think this is the lane you should be living in, right? Roster turnover at an all-time high. You bring these guys in. If they don't work out, all right, you bring someone else in. Like, to me, you should be loading up the back end of your class like this, and kind of reminds me of Xavier Legette, first-round pick. He was another in-state prospect that the Gamecocks kind of took a chance on, played multiple positions, worked out for them. Took a few years for him to see the field. But if I was running a department there or really anywhere else, I'm trying to take the best athletes in the state. I think Hallman is just that. Someone you just roll the dice, figure it out. He can play special teams, boom. And I think they like him on defense. But, reading the Big Spur, our South Carolina site, like when he was coming to camp, I think one of the guys I noted, like every position coach wanted him to kind of go through some drills. And, that's what it should be like. Hey, like the DB coach fighting the running back coach to work that kid out.
Yeah, and I think you kind of put that perfectly. For South Carolina, the upside is just too high there to kind of pass up on a kid like that in your own state. You mentioned the track and field background. I still think the football development is taking place, right? The maturation that still has yet to happen there. But beautiful take by South Carolina. Rarely do I ever describe it, but like that one in their own backyard. Juju Marks to Kansas, number 32 offensive tackle, two-way guy, basketball background, estimated 6'7", probably floating around 260, 270 pounds. Big body, Drew. And this is one guy that I wrote up, I think defensively, given his background, given his stature, you look at the athletic foundation. I had a top 247 grade on this guy a couple months ago. And the only reason I'm saying that is not to say we got him ranked a certain way. It's kind of what I thought of. I think this kid's got a lot of physical ability as well. And I love the fact that he plays on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I think I was a little surprised that he's going to play offensive tackle at the next level. But that being said, you see the size, you see the traits. If you're Kansas, you're all over it.
Yeah, former basketball-focused athlete. You said he's 6'7". I actually saw him at a 7-on-7 tournament. He was just hanging out. I don't think he's 6'7", but he's over 6'5". He bills himself as an OT, right? And like all the tapes on the defensive side of the ball. I think bottom line here, Kansas getting the job done, a elite in-state prospect. And you're right, he came up in that top 247 conversation. I think we kind of held because he's got some certain tags on the next gen player card that we just want to learn a little bit more about. But for Kansas, man, big pickup. And this is what they should be doing. I feel like I say that for every program, but in-state talent. And it feels like they're finally breaking into getting more blue chip guys. Deshaun Warner last cycle, they got By Job coming through the transfer portal. They win games without that, caliber of an athlete. Now they're recruiting that caliber of athlete.
All right, last one here. Notables, commitments. Timothy Merritt to Miami, 6'2", 180 pounds, out of Parker High School in Birmingham, Alabama. That Parker team, man, they got some dudes there. Naeem offered the other guy as well. Jordan Crawford, I think, also on the defensive line. So a lot of talent. Drew, this is a kid that early evaluation, you see him, long, reactionary kid, really good quickness, easy on the eyes, clean hips. I didn't think the junior year was kind of a hodgepodge. It was just okay. We didn't have a ton of data on him, but you see flashes of what this kid can be. And I kind of went back and forth. Should we slide him a little bit? We have him at an 88, but I'm thinking, all right, well, if he can put it together as a senior, the size is there, the athleticism is there. There is a lot to like. That's kind of where I'm at with Timothy Merritt. And I'm sure Miami's kind of in the same boat. It's hard to kind of find these guys that have all those kind of tangibles that I just described. So he's more of a wait and see guy, but I'm excited to kind of see his senior season.
If you're going to miss big. I mean, that's kind of my thought with him. I do think Miami going into Alabama, they continue to like prioritize Alabama, Louisiana. I like that play. I think those kids kind of have an edge to them. Timothy Merritt, not as familiar as you, right? I'm not the former Birmingham resident. And then, Miami, you want to talk about teams taking it out of park and putting it in a drive, sitting 43 right now. Ton of, blue chippers, top 247 kids have visited the past few weeks, only going to continue. Like, when are they going to start their run?
I don't know, but it's coming. I mean, it's coming. If you know anything about Mario Cristobal, it is it will happen at some point. So we'll see. We'll keep a close eye on Miami. They're working hard on recruiting behind the scenes. Guys, with that being said, we're an hour into the broadcast now. It's a perfect time to transition to viewer questions. But just a quick reminder, if you're watching the show, make sure to like and subscribe. We appreciate you guys being on. We also appreciate our guy, Tom Lloyd, being in the chat. And if you have some questions for him, make sure to get those in as well. Let's start with our guy, Reply Guy. Maybe one of my favorites, Drew, of the people who watch our show, because this dude, Reply Guy, just in the weed at Zone Defense wins. He said, question for the Oyster Boys. Who are your favorite short-armed D-line prospects this year? And who are your favorite long-armed D-line prospects that haven't put it together yet? Love the pod. Thank you, Reply Guy. Great question. And one that, is incredibly, incredibly detailed. So tip of the cap to you. Drew, I know it was kind of slanted for the defensive line. What's funny? You and I were talking before the show. We were talking about this question. And I think this is a little bit pleasing for us. But with the context that we have, the verified context that we have, there's not a lot of dudes with short arms in the top 247 at on the defensive line. And I think that is more philosophical.
Are we including edges in this?
You can include edge, because I think it'd be a little bit easier to answer the question. On the offensive side of the ball, Mal Waldrop out of Central Phoenix is, I believe, coming off the board here soon. And he's an intriguing guy. We have him as a 88 high 3-star grade. He plays left tackle, 7A ball, really good foot, really good body quickness. Guy's got an 80-inch wing, but his arm length is on the shorter side, which really kind of forces him inside at the next level. I think he can play 3 or 4 different spots. I think he's got the ability to play right tackle. I think ultimately he'll end up maybe potentially even being a center. I think that's kind of where his home is going to be. But those are interesting things that you always take into consideration. I'll tell you this, though, man, like, you got to be careful, more so careful with the arm length on defense, I feel like. Guys like Aaron Donald always come up when we do this. Peter Woods. Kalaj Yancey. Like, if these guys have an elite redeeming trait, and, with Donald, Yancey, it's pretty similar just in terms of their initial quickness, their get off, their ability to win off the line of scrimmage, and then their speed to power ability as well. Then you have to take that into consideration. So it's not an end all be all. And then on the flip side of that, how about Jarrett Smith? I think, Drew, we have him at 37. I do not think that is right. I think he's probably 35 inches plus. Jarrett Smith is one of those more intriguing prospects that we have, and Drew talks about him all the time. He's got a basketball background. He's got this long, lanky frame. He's transferred to Thompson. On paper, like, this dude is everything you want, checks every single box, and he has shown flashes. You just want him to be a little bit more physical, but just in terms of dudes that just haven't put it all together yet, and you kind of put your head on the pillow and you're like, if this light bulb comes on, this dude's going to be pretty different. Jarrett Smith, kind of the first guy that comes to my mind.
All right, so for short arm, right, I think there's only, like, on the D line, there's like one red number when it comes to arm length in the top 247. Kevin Wynn, IDL.
Yeah, but the cool thing about the red number, the way that we do it, the color codes in our system in Next Gen, so it's connected to where these guys would currently project in the NFL. So that means he would be in the bottom 30% in the NFL. But the fact that he's tracking to an NFL metric is more of a positive at this point, right? For somebody who's 17 years of
Yeah.
age. So there's the context on that.
He's just the one that I think he's kind of on sawed off a little bit. Floyd Buchard, Cooper, you have no idea who that is. Just visited
Nope.
USC over the weekend. I think he's a little sawed off as well. Kid that's originally from Canada, spent time in Alabama. Now he's at Miami Central for his senior season. I know he's visited Miami, USC. Guy we're keeping an eye on. Like those are two that are, I think, lack length when it comes to the IDLs off the top of my head. And then I'll give you two kind of like long arm guys. Jalen Wiggins, who's committed to Florida. Someone where, and it like a Jared Smith type has all the physical features. I don't think he's kind of put it all together yet. He's one with vine-like arms. And then another one from the Sunshine State. I don't want to mess his name up. Sorry. Javion Hilson committed to Florida State. Kind of like the same thing. Like you see the measurements on these guys. I think they just leave a lot or a little to be desired. I have Hilson graded higher than Wiggins, but they're interesting players in that sense.
Wiggins is fascinating and
Dude,
reminds me a lot of Zach Harrison out of Ohio State.
Perfect player comp.
Yeah,
I saw that in the
poor man Zach Harrison, but that's always been the one. It's like, we always wanted to say Zach Harrison was going to play on the edge, and I'm like, this guy is just a linear long stride. Like Zach Harrison was a track and field guy. He was a sprinter. He wasn't really kind of geared laterally. It was more upfield, so you had to play him inside. I think that's going to be the same thing that happens with Jalen Wiggins. So great question there, reply guy. Drew, it wouldn't be a Q&A without our boy Canes Cats, Heat 305. He's got some heat for us. Drew, hopefully you know this because I do not know these two guys. He says, question to Andrew and Coop, thoughts on Jamar Browder, newest NC State commit. Have both of you guys seen him in person or on the camp circuit? Guy is huge and a problem. Same for Robert Jones III.
Yeah, Jamar Browder, seen him play a bunch of 7-on-7. Kind of, to me, Coop, I don't want to say it's like an interesting take for NC State, but we love that wide receiver class that they brought in last year. And Jamar Browder's a little bit different in terms of I would think off the hoof, he's the biggest kind of what they got assembled. Saw him at the National Combine, seen him play 7-on-7. Ball skills are there. I think there's maybe some questions about, all right, what type of athletic juice do we have inside of him? But he can win on the perimeter. It's funny. I thought I had heard he was like silent to a G5 program, and you look up and it's like, whoa, committed to NC State. Robert Jones, kind of the same thing. Can play multiple spots in the secondary. He's a kid that is going to spend his senior season at Vero Beach. I think he started off somewhere else. Is he a safety? Is he a corner? I think he offers some versatility. I thought he was going to end up at USF. I mean, they were all in on him, Alex Galesh and that staff. And now he's committed to NC State. Look, the Wolfpack have had a ton of success with these like 3-star DBs that come out of kind of below that Orlando line. So I like both the takes for the Wolfpack. And where are they sitting in the rankings right now? 57.
I like what NC State is doing. Maybe currently this year, we're still kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, but that seems to be one of those programs, scouting wise, that's got a pretty good idea of what they're doing. All right, Drew from Ryan, he said, y'all dropped Adrian Wilson by 15 spots at receiver. Any reason behind it?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it on the front end of the show, right? That kind of wide receiver position. All right, which one do you kind of want to hitch your wagon to? He's another guy that I'm just going to leave it like this. There's some tags on the player card where we felt like we wanted to move some other wide receivers ahead of him. Kept him as a 90. Coop, what has he got? Like a 6'4" high jump on there? I mean, he's an athlete. But at the same time, this is a guy that, has already made multiple commitments. I think we're just a case where we've come across more wide receivers that we want to hedge our bet to. But I think when you look at Arizona State's class, one of my favorites in there, in addition to my other guy, Cameron Dyer out of New Mexico. And Arizona State's sitting 15 right now in the rankings. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on Adrian Wilson?
I haven't, I'm not well versed in Adrian Wilson, but just, I've been in the conversations, obviously, when we've discussed Adrian. Well, it seems a lot like Jacoby Lane,
Yeah.
who's now at USC. There's just some things around him. I think Jacoby's was more academic. Didn't know if he was going to qualify. USC ends up taking him. He ends up sticking. Shoot, man, I turned on the USC spring game and I see this big old creature, and I'm like, so much talent at the receiver position. And I'm kind of like, who is that guy? And it was Jacoby Lane. And I know they're really excited about him. So I think we're kind of in a similar position, just reading between the lines on Adrian Wilson. All right, Drew, last one here from Tyler Eubanks. He says, is it more difficult to find true middle linebackers? Is it indicative of 7-on-7 prevalence, kids wanting to be an inbox, defensive back, edge? Is it the rule changes? Modern offensive RPOs, all the above.
All of the above.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything. I think it's funny. The first name that kind of came to my head when I read this question was kind of like Raylan Wilson. Which if you watch Raylan Wilson, he did a little bit of everything. He played running back, right? Played linebacker, returned punts. The best athlete on the field, had the track and field background. You look for these guys with these athletic traits. Chris Cole was another guy who played safety before he ended up moving to the linebacker position. Chris Williams, I'm talking about all Georgia backers. I love these Georgia backers, but all super versatile. And a lot of these guys are going to end up playing inside. And what I find about the guys that end up going high, at least in my mind, like the guys that I gravitate to in the evaluation process at the inside linebacker position often are well-versed at other positions that they play on defense throughout their high school career. And then once they get to college, they settle into that inside linebacker spot and start to get the feel, build a repetition, start to get a little bit more of a muscle memory. I think so much of it is you want dynamic athletes, speed and space backers, guys that can flow laterally, but also can play downhill as well, have the key and diagnose. The guys that we look at that are true backers, the other one is like Luke Metz. Like I like Luke Metz, but it's easy to kind of put a guy like that in a box. And what I mean by that, he's a good athlete, but playing inside backer, you kind of see what he is. He's more high floor, and maybe he gets a bad rep that way. But you're kind of thinking like, all right, what's kind of like what's the ceiling on this guy, right? And what he is, and he is a physically put together player as well. And there are going to be a lot of positives that come with that. He's going to be able to provide immediate depth. He's a smart, instinctive player, and he's going to be ready to go a lot earlier. The longer burn is these multi-dimensional. Like you look at Harold Perkins 3 years in, and the big question mark on him is still learning the inside linebacker position. But you can see what he can do with just his raw physical ability. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I guess that people look at it differently. And that's I'm always looking for the athlete, maybe more so, that flashes the instincts that can develop over time rather than the guy that's got the instincts but lacks the desirable traits. And that's a position where you got to be super careful because the instincts, the headiness, all that ability is at the forefront. If you don't have that, then you can't play. So you have to have those intangibles as well.
Just to add on there, I think projecting to the NFL with that linebacker position is extremely hard. I think the 2023 NFL draft, right? Like there was 4 day 3 linebackers that came off the board that were just like strictly high school quarterbacks. And that speaks to what you were bringing up in terms of like playing different positions. I think what we're trying to look for, obviously, at that, really good athletes, and then instincts. Like, can they read? Can they process? How do they trigger? They put themselves in position to make plays. I think that is something that you either have it or you don't. I mean, you can try to learn it. And the other thing, I mean, with these linebackers like Coop, I mean, the ones that kind of match up the instincts and the athleticism, like those, there's a small group in Georgia, and the other schools kind of gobble them up real fast, the elite ones. You know, you think back to like Chris Cole, like last cycle.
Billy Amuasa is one of those guys who, like, I always talk about those guys that have what you just described, plays as fast as he processes. And if I write that in my report, that means they're a synchronized player. And I don't write that for really any other position outside of that linebacker position. So yeah, no, I think you're right. I think there's only maybe like 3 or 4 of those guys a year. There's not a lot. That might be even giving it too much credit.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we appreciate you joining the show. Loaded show. We got Tom Loy in the chat taking questions. Tom Loy, we appreciate you. One of the best in the business. Make sure to follow him on X. Make sure to follow my guy, Andrew Ivins, on X. And make sure to follow the Oyster Boys on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Remember, you can find us every Tuesday, Wednesday at noon Eastern Time. And if you have a question for future reference, the YouTube channel is the place to submit it. Guys, please make sure to like and subscribe. We appreciate everything you guys do for us as always, and we always enjoy bringing you this show. For Andrew Ivins, Tom Loy, I'm Cooper Petagna. Guys, same time tomorrow. We'll see you then.